Hello, Manu. I don't know how coherent I'll be. It's been an evening of heavy parenting, and although I'd like adulting and parenting to overlap, I'm never quite sure when that's the case or if that works when I'm in the middle of it. Well, anyway, here I am. Let's take a look at your account of playing this game. And one, okay, I got to break it up. That's a huge, dense set of questions, thoughts, whatever's that you provided, which is great. But it's almost like, okay, class, let's sit down and address this text from multiple angles, week after week, different essays to write, different books to look up, different experiments of your own to try, and then we'll come back to this game again and look at it again next week with. Okay, I'll try my best with a couple things. First, let's examine your question about intuitive continuity in terms of when you used it. Now, I'm going to break up the session you described into two sets, which I think you'll understand exactly where they came from. Set number one was actually the second one observed in play. It's the one I think that you had well in hand. You had the whole situation with the children. You talked about a relationship map you prepped, which I'm pretty sure had something to do with that material. It didn't seem to correspond to anything that happened first in play. So I'm going to assume, I hope I'm right, that the relationship map was wrapped up with the imprisoned or to be educated kids and the network of Sith and other people who were involved with that. Okay, so you had that. You effectively said, okay, great, we're going to play Star Wars, and in this conception of Star Wars, it's all about the ideology of Jedi and Sith and the emotional backstopping of one's commitment. Okay, great. Fortunately, to shift topic just a little, fortunately, you had people with you who tuned into that immediately, and no wonder you said, well, what are we or aren't we going to have? And they're like, well, I don't freaking know, because they were ready to go. They, it became clear in your account that when the rubber hit the road about exactly that topic that I just mentioned, they were on it. That's worth mentioning because in many cases that's not what you'd get by saying, let's play some Star Wars, and you might end up with a bunch of people with really varying ideas on what on earth those two words mean for play. But saying it in passing, the other people were on it. Great, you've got a scenario, that is to say, a loaded set of relationships and various things about it, and bad acts in progress, of course, villainy, lots of understandable aspects of it across different characters. Great. And it's predicated that they're playing Jedi, I think, or at least that's what they all made. So you have everything right there. Now let's look at that first part of play. And now I think you can probably see where I'm coming from, which is your decision, and it is a decision. Whether it was an unconsidered one is easily understood, but it must be recognized as a decision. To have them not know about one another, and to have them actually in fairly different spots. That's kind of interesting. It leads one to speculate irresponsibly, leads one to ask questions that are more, open your mind, crack open your mind questions rather than actually wanting an easy, a fairly, what seems an obvious answer, which turns out to be no answer. A question along the lines of, why? Well, rather than go in those directions, so I'm not interested in processing this. I'll just say flat out that nothing you could have done along those lines, that is, except putting them in proximity of the situation and knowing about one another, nothing that you could have done that added to the amount of play before that really means a whole lot. The only thing that I could see would be, for example, a vignette of each character. And then it's like, all right, now, armed with your information, you're meeting up for the first time. And you know why. You would have like one or two of the clues in question, perhaps. And it would pick up right at the point, and here I shall pull out my printout, which I've marked, could easily have been the starting situation well after all that business about sensing one another but not knowing who one another was and differing amounts of information per character. There are worse things than that. But I am saying that this is exactly the point where you talked about, well, you used all sorts of language like uncomfortable. You weren't having freaking fun, okay? Let's just put that right out there on the table. We're talking about that first part of play. And in your account, seems very clear, this is where you were real hitchy and itchy. And I'm going to say that if you didn't have them all together with at least a modicum of information about one another and this situation going on, if you don't start right there, then in a game like this, where you do have this fairly focused knot of here's where the action is, then you have absolutely no choice whatsoever except to get them there. And they're not telepathic, and for some reason there may be this weird aesthetic going on that God help us all unless it's completely naturalistic. They have to find out these things the way people find these things out, and they have to decide them with a choice about what to do about it, and yet somehow it's all got to get there. So Robbie was very kind, I think, or maybe he's a generous spirit, unlike me, when he says, that was awesome the way you handled. Yeah, it was awesome in the sense that having dug the hole, you were able to fill it back in. It was successful insofar as you provided yourself with a pretty unnecessary task. And then you performed that task, which has to be intuitive continuity. You had to get them there. So no matter what they did and what they rolled and how it worked out, and, we'll toss in a cruiser and stuff to avoid, and, da-da-da. And it's going to bend to getting there. I can even point out, I think, the spot. Right. I asked myself where a logical place to hold the captives would be, what were the bad guys doing, how would the smugglers react, and so on. Basically pretty easy. And as the group heads back to the spaceport, I wanted to add in some tension, so I came up with the idea that a Force-sensitive Imperial agent on the planet felt the Jedi's use of the Force and reported this to the nearest Star Destroyer. So here comes this Imperial shuttle. And what I'm talking about, that place where I said, aha, right? This is the bend. This is the arrival. Because that part I'm talking about where you're like, well, okay, well, then this guy will do that, and then this ship will land and all this. This is you, seeing what they've done and laying track, and you're like putting enough material there. And then finally we see where the track is heading at this sentence. Their destination is the black site Jedha 3 found, where other captured children are being made to join the dark side or being experimented on. Bam. Now we're where we needed to be. I'm not necessarily saying that you had to start with them all crouching around the perimeter of that compound, but I am saying that if you start with them far, far away, separated, ignorant of one another, and all the rest of it, you, I think, are fair in assuming that since we're playing Jedi, given a rightful cause and, Sith afoot, that it isn't too terrible to assume that they're going to hook up and go together. And I'm not even saying that's a bad thing or whatever. I'm not saying, well, we should always be prepared for one of them to go fuck off to the other universe. No, I get that. And they do too. They're on it. So the question is, why send them all off, start with them all off and separate wild geese and say to yourself, all right, wow, I put them all out there and, oh shit, I have to get them all back together again. See what I mean about digging a hole and then having to fill it back up again? The fact that you did competently fill it back up again using the technique of intuitive continuity is fine, but as I say, the fun factor seems a little mild. Am I reading your mind? Let's see, I am not reading your mind. This was the most uncomfortable part of the session. I had to struggle a bit to come up with how to get everyone together, and to some extent it felt like I was forcing people into it. Whether intuitive continuity is forcing people into it in the ordinary sense of scruffing the players no matter what they say in a way that irritates them, that can be left up to personal devices. That you were controlling the events by tap dancing in front of them, gathering material, waiting for some way to kind of juice it up. Some dude senses them and here comes the cruiser, right? That kind of thing. And then saying, and we've got them in motion. They're actually running in parallel now, looking at each other and saying, oh, we're a Jedi team. And bam, okay. That black site, that's the joint. That's classic intuitive continuity. And I don't mean that to be like a scarlet letter on you. I'm saying you asked if that's what was going on. That's what we see. And I hope to have explained why you were in that position. Is all that bad? No, not particularly, but imagine not having to do it. And what would have been lost if the Jedi had been more in proximity with a little more information. And we don't have to change anything about the players' attitudes. They seem to have come in with a goodwill, ready to be Jedi, both in terms of let's go save the day, and also open to conflict, internal conflict about forciness, which is great. So they're on it. I mean, your players are in no way, shape, or form, they were ready to run with where you eventually got them to. And I'm certain they would have been ready to go with it if they had been a little bit nearer to that point at the outset. So that's the real sort of self-reflective question is, what do I feel I gained from having them be that far apart in proximity and in awareness to start? What was gained by doing that? And that's an interesting question. Does it make the whole thing more naturalistic? Bringing in kind of a how we met into things? At the moment, maybe I'm not the best person to bring up that topic. I just spent some time in writing Champions Rules, talking about how we met is not really what we came to play Champions for. But if that's a huge priority for you, then that's where you're going to be in. You're going to be in digging the hole and then filling it up, and you're going to have to use intuitive continuity to do it. Or you could say, I'm going to start a little closer to things that are going on. One of the important points about Sorcerer, in this regard, where the characters are often utterly ignorant of one another, and they also have kind of this equivalent of partial knowledge through perception of each other. We don't know how much each character is going to recognize about the other characters and the other demons when they bump into one another. But that's the important point in Sorcerer, is that their paths are crossing. They are in the same space. And you got dragons in a cave, and even if they don't know each other's there, sooner or later dragons are going to be in each other's face in some fashion. So that's my thoughts. Hope that was interesting or shows you kind of where I'm at with these topics. And I'm kind of interested, given the forceful, we've used that word for like 3 different things already, 4 different things by now, that the really engaging aspect of the players really embracing, am I or am I not into the dark side? Can't I appeal to the humanity of the other, of the Sith? And so you've basically got sort of a Mephisto and Silver Surfer situation where the battle isn't about whether I can kill you, control you, destroy you, ruin what you want. No, it's about making you understand me and being with me and seeing things my way and making decisions that I would like you to make. It's kind of an interesting cross with empathy and control. And the whole Star Wars thing is just rife with this, and the players were great on that. You were great on that. So yes, I am all awesome-y, just like Robbie, but I'm talking about when that hole was filled and going forward. The question being, why bother doing that part? Why not just start where they were standing by the time the hole got filled and proceed from there? All right. See you later.